Okay, we're going to read from the Bhagavatam.
Canto 2, Chapter 10, Text 27.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Alright, text 27. Thereafter, when he, that's Krishna, desired to evacuate the refuse of eatables, the evacuating hole, anus, and the sensory organ thereof developed along with the controlling deity Mitra. So you have a deity, a deity controlling, that stuff.
What stuff?
Going to the loo and all that.
Oh.
The sensory
worshipable deity, is it?
The sensory organ and the evacuating substance are both under the shelter of the controlling deity. Purport. Even in the matter of evacuating stool, the refuse is controlled. So how can a living entity claim to be independent?
Yeah, I often use that as an example when I give talks, that we try to talk about how much we're in control, but actually we can't even really control our own bowels sometimes. Some people can, but as we get older...
So we've heard, yeah.
So we've heard. Okay, text 28. Thereafter, when he desired to move from one body to another, the navel and the air of departure and death were combinedly created. The navel is the shelter for both, namely death and the separating force. Interesting. Hello, Rekha.
Hi, Krishna Rekha.
The pranavayu continues the life, and the apanavayu stops the living force. Both the vibrations are generated from the abdominal hole, the navel. This navel is the joint from one body to the other. Lord Brahma was born of the abdominal hole of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu as a separate body, and the same principle is followed even in the birth of an ordinary body. The body of the child develops from the body of the mother, and when the child is separated from the body of the mother, it is separated by cutting the navel joint. And that is the way the Supreme Lord manifested himself as separated many. Interesting. The living entities are therefore separated parts, and thus they have no independence. Means they're connected. So it's an interesting point. I remember hearing this many years ago. I think it was pre-Krishna consciousness. But someone said, everybody has a belly button or a navel. Therefore, we're all connected. And I never really quite got it, because most people have eyes. But someone can be born blind, or someone can be born mute, someone can be born maybe without a nose or ears. But nobody is born without a belly button, as a matter of fact, actually, because I don't think you can be. I mean, test tube babies, or something is done in the test tube, but then they still have to be put into the womb of someone. They're not really born out of a test tube. So, interesting concept. There you go.
Okay. Text 29. When there was a desire to have food and drink, the abdomen and the intestines and also the arteries became manifested. The rivers and seas are the source of their sustenance and metabolism. The controlling deities of the intestines are the rivers, and those of the arteries the seas. Fulfillment of the belly with food and drink is the cause of sustenance, and the metabolism of the food and drink replaces the waste of the bodily energies. Therefore, the body's health is dependent on healthy actions of the intestines and the arteries. The rivers and the seas, being the controlling deities of the two, keep the intestines and the arteries in healthy order.
Must be why they say it's better and healthy to live near bodies of water, or to walk near bodies of water. When people go on holiday, they often go near water. I remember some years ago when visiting Brighton, my family came to visit, and on the tour they were saying that Brighton used to be by the royals, visited by the royals, and many people from all over Europe would come there because it was like considered a healing place. So like that, going next to the water. Text 30. When there was a desire to think about the activities of his own energy, then the heart, the seat of the mind, the moon, determination, and all desire became manifested. Purport. The heart of every living entity is the seat of the Supersoul, Paramatma, a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without his presence, the living entity cannot get into the working energy according to his past deeds. The living entities who are conditioned in the material world are manifested in the creation in terms of respective inclinations inherent in them, and the requisite material body is offered to each and every one of them by the material energy under the direction of the Supersoul. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 9:10. When, therefore, the Supersoul is situated in the heart of the conditioned soul, the requisite mind is manifested in the conditioned soul, and he becomes conscious of his occupation as one is conscious of his duty after waking up from slumber. Therefore, the material mind of the living entity develops when the Supersoul sits on his heart, after which the mind, the controlling deity, moon, and then activities of the mind, namely thinking, feeling, and willing, all take place. The activities of the mind cannot begin without the manifestation of the heart, and the heart becomes manifested when the Lord wants to see the activities of the material creation. So the heart, the Lord, the mind, controlling deities, and activities of the mind. The seat of the mind is the heart, and the Lord of the mind is the moon. That's why everyone knows that moon, let's see, in Sanskrit it's Chandra, but I think in Latin it's something lunas. So then that's where the word lunatic comes from, believe it or not. Lunar, because the understanding is that the moon has an effect on the mind, and there are many stories that, on the full moon and all these kind of things.
We get that around there.
Just kidding. Okay, so all this could just be studied so much and put into diagrams and graphs, and maybe as I have more time in life, I can do this sort of thing.
Okay. Text 31. The 7 elements of the body, namely the thin layer on the skin itself, the flesh, blood, fat, marrow, and bone, are all made of earth, water, and fire, whereas the life breath is produced by the sky, water, and air. Purport. The construction of the whole material world is prominently made by 3 elements, namely earth, water, and fire, but the living force is produced by sky, air, and water. So water is the common element in both the gross and subtle forms of all material creation. And it should be noted herewith that due to necessity, water being most prominent in the material creation is the principal element of all the fire. Five.
Fire.
This material body is thus an embodiment of the 5 elements, and the gross manifestation is perceived because of 3, namely earth, water, and fire. Sensations of touch are perceived due to the thin layer on the skin, and bone is as good as hard stone. The breathing air of life is produced of sky air and water, and therefore open air, regular bath, and ample space in which to live are favourable for healthy vitality.
That means not in the centre of London.
Fresh produce from the earth, like grains and vegetables, as well as fresh water and heat, is good for the upkeep of the gross body.
So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. It can keep clean, like having a bath regularly. And go to parks and there's open space, and even if we're in the city.
This is your qualification. This is you qualifying living in the city, right? It's true. I agree. Yeah, walking. If you live in the city like London, which is filled with amazing parks, then yeah, as long as you take regular bath, open air, and ample space. Okay, right. So we'll stay in the city. Text 32. The sense organs are attached to the modes of material nature, and the modes of material nature are products of the false ego. The mind is subjected to all kinds of material experiences, happiness and distress. And the intelligence is the feature of the mind's deliberation. Purport. Illusion by the material nature, the living entity identifies with false ego. More clearly, when the living entity is entrapped by the material body, he at once identifies with the bodily relationships, forgetting his own identity as spirit soul. This false ego associates with different modes of material nature, and thus the senses become attached to the modes of material nature. Mind is the instrument for feeling different material experiences, but intelligence is deliberative and can change everything for the better. Deliberative means relating to or intended for consideration or discussion. So the mind is the intelligence is deliberative and can change everything for the better. Yeah, so the mind is caught up in the modes, but the intelligence should give some direction. The intelligent person, therefore, can attain salvation from the illusion of material existence by proper use of intelligence. An intelligent person can detect the awkward position of material existence and thus begin to inquire as to what he is, why he is subjected to different kinds of miseries, and how to get rid of all miseries. And thus, by good association, an advanced, intelligent person can run towards the better life of self-realization. It is advised, therefore, that an intelligent person associate with the great sages and saints who are on the path of salvation. By such association, one can receive instructions which are able to slacken the conditioned soul's attachment for matter, and thus the intelligent man gradually gets rid of the illusion of matter and false ego and is promoted to the real life of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Very nice. Yeah, very good. Any thoughts on
Important
that?
to have association.
Yeah.
Focus, fixed association.
Yeah, a good description of an intelligent person. And proper use of intelligence.
Yeah. Alright, text 33. Thus, by all this, the external feature of the personality of Godhead is covered by gross forms such as those of planets, which were explained to you by me. Purport. As explained in the Bhagavad Gita 7.4, the separated material energy of the personality of Godhead is covered by 8 kinds of material coverings: earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. All these are emanations from the personality of Godhead as his external energy. These coverings are just like the coverings of clouds for the sun. The cloud is a creation of the sun, yet it actually covers the eye so that one cannot see the sun. The sun cannot be covered by the clouds. The cloud can at utmost extend a few hundred miles in the sky, but the sun is far greater than millions of miles. So a 100-mile covering is not competent to cover millions of miles. Therefore, one of the various energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot, of course, cover the Lord. But these coverings are created by him to cover the eyes of the conditioned souls who want to lord it over the material nature. Actually, the conditioned souls are covered by the illusory creative cloud of matter, and the Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to their eyes. Because they have no eyes of transcendental vision, and because they cannot see the personality of Godhead, they therefore deny the existence of the Lord and the transcendental form of the Lord. The covering of the gigantic material feature is accepted by such men with a poor fund of knowledge, and how this is so is explained in the following verse.
Interesting. 100-mile covering is not competent to cover millions of miles. Yeah, so the Lord cannot be covered, but it seems there are obviously personalities, usually Mayavadis, those who believe that the Lord is covered. He is in Maya. The Lord is his body is Maya, because the Supreme Absolute is Brahman. That's the Mayavad philosophy. So let's see what it says. Did you have anything else to add? Text 34. Therefore, beyond this gross manifestation is a transcendental manifestation, finer than the finest form. It has no beginning, no intermediate stage, and no end. Therefore, it is beyond the limits of expression or mental speculation, and is distinct from the material conception. Purport. The gross external body of the Supreme is manifested at certain intervals, and thus the external feature or form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not the eternal form of the Lord, which has no beginning and no intermediate stage and no end. Anything which has a beginning, interim, and end is called material. The material world is begun from the Lord, and thus the form of the Lord there before the beginning of the material world is certainly transcendental to the finest or the finer material conception. The ether in the material world is considered to be the finest. Finer than ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego. So this term finer means fine, means like thin or invisible. Subtle, yeah. Not like fine, like, man, that was a fine car, that was a fine tune, that was fine. Like, not like good fine or okay fine, but subtle fine. That's very, yeah. It's interesting, different word, huh? Have different meanings. Finer than the ether is mind, intelligence, and false ego, but all 8 of the outward coverings are explained as outer coverings of the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth is therefore beyond the expression and speculation of the material conception. He is certainly transcendental to all material conceptions. This is called nirvisheshanam. One should not, however, misunderstand nirvisheshanam as being without any transcendental qualifications. Visheshanam means qualities. Therefore, nir added to it means that he has no material qualities of variegatedness. This nullifying expression is described in 4 transcendental qualifications, namely unmanifested, transcendental, eternal, and beyond the conception of mind or word. Beyond the limits of words means negation of the material conception. Unless one is transcendentally situated, it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. So we have to become transcendental ourselves in order to really truly understand the transcendental nature or transcendental form of the Lord. Yes?
I'm not sure.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, I don't think I am transcendentally situated. But I feel I do know the Lord quite well because of Srila Prabhupada. In fact, the only thing I know is because of Srila Prabhupada. And he is transcendentally situated. So, how does that work?
Well, it says it is not possible to know the transcendental form of the Lord. So, first of all, one may debate the level of one's transcendence, and humility may say you're not transcendently situated, but that may or may not be true to a greater or lesser extent. But to really know the form of the Lord, of course, all of our acharyas, the greatest acharyas, Srila Goswami, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, Bhaktivedanta Thakur, these personalities, their claim and statement is that they do not know the Lord. They're always searching to know the Lord. So, and they say that anyone who thinks that they know the Lord, because often you meet people who say, I am knowing Krishna, but they're not really knowing so much about Krishna. They just think they know something about Krishna. So I'm not sure which category do you think that you fall into?
Alternative.
What's alternative?
Well, I'm not saying it just to be humble, and I'm not. And on the other hand, I'm not knowing and pretending knowing or not knowing. I just meant Prabhupada has opened up. You know what we get from Prabhupada's purports and what he's taught us is like fast forward as far as self-realization is concerned. And Lord knows how many lifetimes we'd have to meditate to get to know the knowledge he's given.
Of course, but with knowledge one transcends.
Right.
Because becoming transcendental means that you transcend the modes of material nature. The lowest mode is ignorance. So with knowledge, one transcends ignorance. Passion means that one is self-motivated. So with knowledge of Krishna consciousness, the practice of Krishna consciousness, one becomes motivated to serve Krishna. So then that means the mode of passion is to some extent transcendent. And the mode of goodness, which is the platform or springboard for moving into transcendence or spiritual perfection, is epitomized by having knowledge. So that means when one is in knowledge, one is generally situated in the mode of goodness. But if that knowledge is about Krishna and it's transcendental knowledge, and one is acting on transcendental knowledge, it is not just Gyan, it is Vigyan. And realized transcendental knowledge means that one is basically situated on a transcendental platform. Whereas if you go to Oxford and you meet with many professors who may be very intelligent, and they may be situated in the mode of goodness even, let's say hypothetically, it's quite possibly a little unlikely, but to some extent they may be, because knowledge brings about goodness. But are they on the transcendental platform? No. But is someone who is trying to dedicate their life to the service of Krishna, reading about Krishna, hearing about Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna, sitting in front of a picture of Lord Chaitanya, talking into Facebook about Krishna, reading the Bhagavatam, that means that to some extent we're on the transcendental platform. And I agree, we're not transcendental, not trying to say that, but there's a certain level of understanding that we have some knowledge of Krishna and the form of Krishna, because we've sort of transcended ignorance and passion. And I mean, does that make sense? So it's hard to speak objectively, because we don't consider ourselves transcendental by any stretch of the imagination. But still we understand that this form behind us is not just some surfer dude, jumping out of the waves on the Pacific Ocean. But this is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibiting the ecstasies of love of God and in Jagannath Puri. So what is that? Someone who doesn't know, don't know, and they're not transcendental. So maybe we should move on. Who's reading next? Me?
No, me.
Okay. Oh, and then.
Text 35. Neither of the above forms of the Lord, as just described unto you from the material angle of vision, is accepted by the pure devotees of the Lord who know him well. Purport. The impersonalists think of the absolute personality of Godhead in two different ways as above mentioned. On the one hand, they worship the Lord in his Vishwarup or all-pervading universal form, and on the other, they think of the Lord's unmanifested, indescribable, subtle form. The theories of pantheism and monism are respectively applicable to these two conceptions of the Supreme as gross and subtle, but both of them are rejected by the learned pure devotees of the Lord because they are aware of the factual position. This is very clearly mentioned in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which records Arjuna's experience of the Vishwarup of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Adrista purvam shrishito asmi dristva bhayena cha prav ya tita mano me tad eva me darsana deva rupam prasida devesha jagan nivasha. That's 1145. Arjuna, an SU. It's the next paragraph.
I didn't show a paragraph there.
No. Arjuna. Alright, go on. I'm trying to diddle. I don't get it.
What is that, Matt? What is that?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Arjuna, as a pure devotee of the Lord, never previously saw the contemplated universal form of the Lord, Vishvarup. But when he did see it, his curiosities were satisfied. But he was not happy to see such a form of the Lord because of his attachment as a pure devotee. He was afraid to see the gigantic form of the Lord. He therefore prayed to the Lord to assume his four-handed Narayan or Krishna form, which alone could please Arjuna. Undoubtedly, the Lord has the supreme potency to exhibit himself in multifarious forms. But the pure devotees of the Lord are interested in his forms as eternally exhibited in the abode of the Lord known as Tripad Vibhuti, or Kingdom of God. The Lord in the Tripad Vibhuti abode exhibits himself in two forms, either with four hands or with two hands. The Vishvarup exhibited in the material manifestation has unlimited hands and unlimited dimensions, with everything unlimited. The pure devotees of the Lord worship him in his Vaikuntha forms as Narayan or Krishna. Sometimes the same Vaikuntha forms of the Lord are in the material world also by his grace as Sri Ram, Sri Krishna, Sri Nrsingadev, etc. And thus the pure devotees also worship them. Usually the features shown in the material world have no existence in the Vaikuntha planets, and thus they are not accepted by the pure devotees. What the pure devotees worship from the very beginning are eternal forms of the Lord existing in the Vaikuntha planets. The non-devotee impersonalists imagine the material forms of the Lord, and ultimately they merge in the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, whereas the pure devotees of the Lord are worshippers of the Lord, both in the beginning and also in the perfect stage of salvation eternally. I'm going to read that again. The non-devotee impersonalists imagine the material forms of the Lord, and ultimately they merge in the impersonal Brahmajyoti of the Lord, whereas the pure devotees of the Lord are worshippers of the Lord, both in the beginning and also in the perfected stage eternally. So just to stop there for a minute. So that's a really important statement, because it means the non-devotee impersonalists, they concoct some imaginary material forms, or they presume that some material form that's here could be worshipped like that, and ultimately they may merge into the Brahma Jyoti of the Lord, whereas the pure devotee worships the Lord in the beginning, and in perfection that same Lord is there. So the point being that the bhakti is both the sadhya and the sadhana and the sadhya, which means it's the practice, but it's also the same in its perfected form. The worship of the pure devotee never stops, whereas the worship of the impersonalist stops after his attainment of salvation, when he merges in the impersonal form of the Lord, known as the Brahma Jyoti. Therefore, the pure devotees of the Lord are described here as vipaschita, or the learned, who are in knowledge of the Lord perfectly. So that's the pure devotees. There you go. So,
interesting.
I think we should finish there.
Yeah. It's interesting that the impersonalist, his worship stops, his or hers, once they attain their goal.
Do you understand how or why that is?
Well, because they merge, and then they just...
Yeah, you can't do anything when you've merged into the Brahma Jyoti. But before that, they may be, because sometimes the impersonalists or Mayavadis, they will accept a deity form, but they say that that deity form is Maya.
Yeah.
And they say it's just a conduit, it's just a form that represents the Brahman, so that I can relate to it in this personal form, which is temporary and also Maya. So my worship of this deity, or this deity, or this form of the Lord, which is all temporary, is simply a process for me to merge. And then when I merge, I don't have to do anything anymore. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So my realization was that sometimes when we come to Krishna consciousness, we are going through the processes, sadhana, bhakti, doing this, doing that, serving. And then obviously, because like the impersonalists, we're not totally purified or in full knowledge. So when we attain some sort of stability and some sort of service to the Lord, we can also stop actually worshipping the Lord, even though it may appear that we are worshipping the Lord. You know, we don't seek that which is actually love of God, a personal relationship, because we're quite satisfied in just being stuck in that, maybe name, fame, glory, whatever. Because the point is, we should also always be progressing, being humble and becoming deeper in your Krishna consciousness. But it's like we can become impersonal in our progress, so-called progress, by just stopping and just taking at that level we are, just, you know, remaining like treading water on that level of Krishna consciousness. And we actually forget the personal form of the Lord and why we're here.
Interesting. Yeah, and Prabhupada said very nicely that there is no treading water in devotional life, because the force of the river of the illusory energy is always pushing down, and we're swimming against the current. And if we stop and start treading water, then actually we're not standing still, we're moving backwards, because the force of the material energy is pushing us away. So we have to always be striving, which is an important point, because this is kind of like the essence of this new book that I'm reading, Shivaram Maharaj's new book called Sankalpa Kaumudi, which is really about the principle of Sankalpa and having determination, and how determination is such an important facet in our spiritual progress as a sadhika, as a practitioner of sadhana bhakti, to move us to the level of bhava, the level where we actually develop love for Krishna, and really it's dependent on our determination to not get stuck and not get held up like that. So I strongly recommend that book to anyone out there who would like to read it.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we're also We have Chaitanya Charitamrita says, we're leading to Gaur Pranim. Please, please, please sponsor a Chaitanya Charitamrita set or purchase a Chaitanya Charitamrita set. Get in touch with us. Let us know. We'll be happy to supply it to you. Thank you very much.